Hello again. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm doing on my terminal. So we're going to demonstrate now the features we have been discussing earlier on for flow management in Corda Enterprise 4.6. And what you're looking at right now is a shell that I have opened onto a node I'm running locally. This node is running a very simple code up that allows it to create long-lived flows, basically flows that are checkpointed and keep on running without ever exiting an infinite loop, which I have created to populate, which I have used to populate with a number of checkpoints this node I'm running locally. I've also changed the status of some of these flows. I've killed a few. I have let a few complete. So you can actually see a slightly more realistic picture of this feature in a development or a production scenario. So let's start with flow querying. So what can you do with that? Let's go with the most basic thing you can try, which is flow status query flows. And this is going to tell us that we have a bunch of flows of check-pointed flows here on the node. This is interesting to know. It's not very different from what you would get from the old state machine snapshot API. So one thing you can start doing if you want to dig a bit deeper is to query by ID, which is actually going to give you a slightly more complete picture of a specific flow. So this is a flow that has run to completion. You can see it from this flow state. The class of the flow is called start instructable flow, and it belongs to a code up with this name. It was created via an RPC client. You can see here under invocation source. And this is when it was started. I think this is a Unix timestamp or something like that. And it is compatible with the current Corda runtime, of course. So you can see a lot more information than what you would normally get, which was basically this list of IDs earlier on. But what if you want to do something more complicated? Let's say you want to get all flows that are hospitalized. Well, you can base yourselves until you had a look at the documentation on the fields you see here. And for example, let's use flow state, and see what we get. There we go. So this is a shorter list, and we have filtered down this longer list here to a shorter list of flows that are hospitalized on the node at the moment. And for example, we can do something else, which is query flows suspension duration. And so we can have a look at all the flows that have been, for example, suspended for at least 10 seconds. And that gives us a list of basically most of these flows. Let's say, let's give a longer list. All because these have been running for quite a while. But yeah, this is it's just a few examples of the things you can do. You can also combine these query criteria, of course. So you can really drill down into what's happening in your node, and this hopefully gives you a lot more visibility over what's happening in production if you're tasked with maintaining or debugging or monitoring the node. So of course the next API we can demonstrate is the pause and retry one. So let's just type flow, and this gives us a list of all the commonly used flow commands. And we can immediately see that there's a few new ones. We have pause, pause all, and retry all paused, and retry all paused, hospitalized, pause all hospitalized, and so on. So quite a few additional commands for flow management, as you can see, and these are fairly self-explanatory. So let's say we do the simplest thing and we get one of these flows and we do flow pause. So this flow has been, it failed to pause this flow. So let's have a look and see why that is the case. I think I know why, but let's verify. Yes. So this flow is currently complete. So of course it won't be possible to pause it. Let's go back up and maybe let's try and get all the hospitalized flows that we were doing earlier. And then let's try and pause one of these. There we go. So this flow is now paused, and if I actually look at it, my ID, you will see that the state is actually defined as paused. So what's happened here is that this flow will not be retried on a node restart. Let's say this was a problematic flow that we knew it was hospitalized but would not be able to recover on a retry. There's no point in this moment until we have thoroughly debugged it to attempt to retry it and load it in memory every time we restart a node. So we can just set it to paused and proceed at resolving the issue when we have time and when we have more context on it, as opposed to letting the node manage it. And then again, as I mentioned, this is fairly self-explanatory. What you can do is you can retry it. So let's do it. There we go. So let's have a look at it, and you can see that the status is back to hospitalized. This is also partly due to the fact that the examples I'm using for this demo are a bit contrived. Normally, you would retry a flow and let it and hope. Sorry, you would retry a flow that you expect to succeed. In this case, it just goes back to the starting point I used for this demo. So this concludes the demo. I hope it gave you a decent overview of these new features. There will be a lot more for you to discover in the documentation for Corda 4.6 and Corda Enterprise 4.6, so please check that and check the other videos we have prepared to introduce the release. Thanks for listening.